I'm sure you've seen these plaster pillows for coasters and stuff like that, but have you ever seen plaster pillow sconces? Ha! These are even painted too. We're gonna show you how to do it right now. So the first thing you're gonna need is a big old bag of plaster of Paris. We're gonna be making lights, we're gonna be making coasters, we're gonna be making all kinds of things. So we need 2 big bags of plaster of Paris, which you can get at, yep, you guessed it, Rona, your trusted source for all things home improvement. Whether you're a homeowner, a DIY weekend warrior, or a seasoned professional, Rona has everything you need to take on your next project with confidence. As for our project, we needed plaster of Paris, Ziploc bags, mixing paddles, paint, and all sorts of other tools and materials. Rona truly is a one-stop shop for getting the job done right. Back to you, me. In order to make these amazing products, all you really need is plaster of Paris and a few Ziploc bags. We're gonna start with a smaller one. And what you have to do is you have to mix 2 parts of plaster of Paris with 1 part water. Mix it up for a little bit, and then it's gonna start rapidly curing. So once it's still in its slurry state, I'm gonna pour it out of the bucket into the Ziploc bag, get out all the air bubbles, and let it cure. Let me show you how it's done. So, got some water, and we're gonna add 2 parts plaster of Paris to this 1 part of water. Remember, before we start putting our plaster into water, it's going to cure very rapidly. This stuff is gonna harden within 10 minutes, and it's not even gonna be workable after the first 5 minutes. So make sure you're prepared. I'm gonna pour this into the water, I'm gonna have my mixer, and I wanna have my Ziploc bag ready. So let's open the Ziploc bags first and make sure we set out a couple, and I'm even gonna go so far as to take the Ziploc bag and I'm gonna open it up like this to give myself a mouth for the Ziploc bag to swallow up the plaster. For this first batch, we're actually gonna make 2 beautiful coasters for these 2 husk cups. And I'm now gonna start mixing my plaster. Wear PPE if you're not on camera, please. If you're doing this at home, mask your kids, get a vacuum, do all that good stuff. Let's mix it up. Come on, let's see. You don't want to mix it too much because you might get air bubbles. You'll also want to rinse off the mixer right away so it doesn't harden. So I'll take it over to the Refresh kitchen sink and just rinse it off. Right down the drain so it can harden in the bottom of your P-trap. I forgot about my plaster. I better get pouring it into the Ziploc bag to make the pillows. See how it's a little bit looser than if I was using this to patch holes or something like that? I've got a little runnier, so maybe it's more closer to 1-to-1 than 2-to-1, but you play around with it and see what works in your bags. So here we go. Bag number 1. We're gonna get 1 beautiful coaster. And before I start worrying about that Ziploc bag, I'm just gonna rinse out my bucket so I can do another batch for my other coaster. So since I flipped it over, I have to flip the locking mechanism back, and I'm going to try to get as much of the air out of this bag as possible. I'm going to close part of it, I'm going to work the bubbles. So now that I've got that all, most of the air is out of that, but you can see that there's still some micro bubbles on the surface here, which if you do kind of just shake it around, move it around a little bit, you can end up getting a lot of those to disappear. But what we want to have happen at this point is we want this pillow to look fluffy and full. So by folding the edge and making it extremely tight, I'm able to shrink the Ziploc bag and in the end, make a bigger, fluffier pillow. See how it sort of plumped up in the middle? I just want to make sure when I do that, that I still have really sharp corners here on the edge. Because we want it to look like Mummy's pillow that she's set out for her baby boy to have a nice rest. Now that I've got the pillow looking as plush as I want it to, I'm able to embed something into the center of it. That's what really gives it that pillow look. Like with all these samples that we have done, the pillow isn't anything until you stuff something and let it harden with something squishing it down in the middle, giving it the wrinkles on the corner. So you'll play around with it, you'll realize which looks better than others. Maybe you want it to be fuller, maybe you don't want it to be as full. For this one, I'm happy with where it is, and I'm now gonna put my cup right in the middle of it and watch as the corners start to fold up. I filled it up with water so it would push down even further. And I'm just gonna play around with putting it in the middle. And did you see how the corners start to wrinkle up? And that's really all there is to it. Now what we're probably going to find on this first batch that we've done here is that we may have had the plaster too runny, we may have mixed it too much with the mixing paddle, adding too many air bubbles. So as we keep going throughout this process, I'm going to show you some different ways to work with it, but ultimately at your house, you have to do what works for you. And all we have to do now is wait for this thing to dry. But why wait when we could just keep going? So I'll move this over to the side and let's mix up another batch, maybe a little bit less wet. So for this one, I'm just going to use a little bit less water and a little bit more plaster of Paris. Also, instead of using a drill, I'm going to use a stir stick. That's pretty cool. There we go. Let's stir it up. Basically, by using a stir stick instead of a whipping paddle, you're adding less air bubbles into the mixture. This mixture is sort of ending up still pretty loose. I'm just going to add a little bit more. This is something that you'll kind of play around with when you're doing your mixtures too. You can see it's a little bit thicker. That's how you like her. Want it thick, but still runny enough to be able to pour into the bag. All right, you can see there's no air bubbles in that either. And let's get to pouring. You can see how much thicker this batch of plaster is, right? It's not pouring out of the bucket the same way. Just give it a little coursing, in you go. Rinse that out. Let's work this guy into his bag. And again, I don't have an exact recipe to make these bags all the same size, but you can. You can start to measure out exactly how much plaster of Paris you want, exactly how much water, then you know you're getting the exact same amount in every bag. I'm not worried about it. I don't care if I have a slightly bigger coaster or smaller coaster, so I'm just playing around with each batch. So again, I'm gonna put the collar back up, and I'm going to close it almost completely, and I'm just gonna work so there's still an opening here, and I'm gonna work all the air out of this. I'm going to work it into the corner first, into the corner where it's closed. See how I'm working it, I'm getting all those air bubbles out of there. Working it into the corner, make sure it's getting in there. Closing all that up, and as it starts to close here, I can start to close the Ziploc bag. And ooze out the rest. So now I have a airless bag of plaster that's ready to be compressed. But I want it to be a little bit more full than that. So like I showed you before, I'm actually going to flip the bag and I'm just going to close off one of the sides. I'm going to make one of the sides a little bit shorter. I'm going to get rid of all the plaster in that one side there. And I'm just going to fold it back on itself to make a perfect edge, giving myself nice sharp corners again. I'm just going to make the bag a little bit smaller so that the plaster's a little bit more full. It really feels like I'm hosting a cooking show, which when I was a kid is something I really wanted to do. That dream died though. I became a renovator. So we've got some plumpness. What do you think? Is that enough plumpness? Or do you want it a little bit more? What do you say, yes? Yes. Okay, no worries. You asked for plump, I say you betcha. You see some of the difference here is that there's not nearly as much air bubbles, There's not nearly as many air bubbles in this mixture. Maybe that's because I used a stir stick. Maybe that's because it's not as wet a batch, but it already looks like it's gonna be doing much better. Watch as the pillow comes to life. Is that good? This pillow's looking good. So there we have it. Now we have two coasters, both done a different way. Who knows how they're going to turn out? Maybe one will be better than the others. You can let us know in the comments before if you want to guess. But my money's on number 2. Let's check back in 15 minutes to see which of the two coasters turned out better. All right, welcome back. And believe it or not, just a few minutes later, it's completely dry. It's completely cured. I'm going to rip them open and see how they look. Come on. Let's start with the first one. It's still hot. See, the good thing about it is it just doesn't stick to the Ziploc. You see, even on the first batch, it's not too bad. This is just all the dried bits from inside. Unbelievable. This is the part that's like an archaeological dig. This one's stunning. See, that stuff that you're like, oh, that doesn't look so good. Look at that. First try. wet batch, gorgeous. It's a perfect coaster or a perfect cup. But that's one done. Let's try number two. Wish you could feel the warmth coming off of these. Just love unwrapping my babies. Isn't cooking great? The more plush the pillow was and the more you compress it, the more details you get in the wrinkling, which I find to be particularly satisfying, but do whatever you want. Because these done almost the exact same way with different types of mixtures, but they turned out completely different. As you saw, I did one with a looser batch and a paddle mixer. I did the other one with a thicker batch and just mixed it by hand. And they did turn out kind of the same in the end. As long as you take all those precautions to get the air bubbles out, you're gonna be pretty happy with the results. So there you go. That's the basics of how to do a plaster pillow. But why stop there? I also want to show you, you may have seen it in our social media videos, how to make a sconce. I know it's weird, but I'm gonna make a plaster pillow sconce. So now that I have all my parts, guess what we're gonna do next? We are going to mix up another batch of plaster. So I'm gonna go through the same course of action like I did last time, but if you look really closely at these first two coasters that we did earlier, you will see that even with the looser batch, the wetter batch, and the drier second batch, there is still some tiny microscopic bubbles. Like this one on the batch that I thought would do better, there are still some bubbles in there. Some people might like that. I don't really want the bubbles to be there. In this wetter batch, there's actually smaller ones, more smaller ones, but less of the big ones. So again, I'm just gonna try to do something in between. It didn't seem like the mixer did anything that was that bad. So I'm gonna use the mixer, I'm gonna make it not so wet, and we're just gonna keep trying till we get it perfect without any bubbles. So you can see when I'm mixing it with the drill, there's so many more bubbles that show up. All right. See how the bubbles are kind of going away? That's where the sconce bulb is gonna go. I've set up a little spray paint area because we're gonna put some color on some of these. We're gonna be using some Rust-Oleum chalked. This is a white and sort of a blush color. We also have a, I don't know, bluey green kind of color. And then after we spray paint these, we're gonna top coat them with this clear matte top coat, which just helps it be a little bit more water resistant, that kind of thing. We're also gonna do a couple of the coasters just with this to see how matte it is, and maybe we wanna leave the plaster kind of color as is. So let's give it a try. Ready? All right, let's get some rows on this thing. Let's try a smaller one, but this time in teal color. All right, that's looking pretty good. Okay, let's do this one. But let's say you like the color of the raw plaster, but you still want to seal it. Well, we found a very cool, very randy matte sealer from Rust-Oleum as well. This is from that same collection. It's the chalked collection, so you know it's going to be uber matte and very sort of hopefully stone-like finish in the end, but still offering some protection against moisture and stuff like that. So let's use some clear matte. It's looking pretty good. These two are the ones we're going to put the light on after. Get into that crevice. It will look like a pillow. Okay, the spraying is done. Aren't they nice? These coasters, very satisfying. I'm not sure if I like colored or raw or whatever like our last time, but very satisfying stuff. Let's turn this linen colored white pillow into a sconce. It's a done deal. That's by far my favorite part. Check this out. Aren't they nice? Now we've shown you exactly how to make plaster pillows for coasters, for lights. You can do whatever you want. But at least you know how to make them yourself so you don't have to buy them from someone else. We're just here to help. A big thank you to Rona for sponsoring this tutorial. We hope you found this walkthrough helpful and enjoyed learning how to make your own plaster pillows. Keep exploring, keep creating, and we'll see you on the next project. Or you never know, you might find us at Rona. We're always there. Where do you learn to do this kind of stuff? That's what people always ask me. I don't know. Ooh. If you want to buy this, hit us up. 600.